What is required under the Constitution to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove a president from office due to an inability to discharge his duties as president? This is Drew Page with the law firm Randall Page, and that's been a question that's been swirling all around the media in recent days after the riots and the break-in at the Capitol and all that's been going on regarding the certification of the election results and the drama that unfolded before us on Wednesday, January 6th of 2021. But what is required in order to invoke the 25th Amendment? You know, you hear Nancy Pelosi, you hear Chuck Schumer, and various media pundits calling on Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. And if that doesn't work, then they're going to file articles of impeachment. They're calling on President Trump to resign. But what is it specifically relating to the 25th Amendment that what do we need to know specifically regarding the 25th Amendment that is necessary in order for a president to be removed from his position as president? Well, a little brief history according to the National Constitution Center. The 25th Amendment was passed back in 1967, and the reason why it was invoked was because of the assassination of JFK and wanting to make sure to establish what would happen in the event that a president needed to be immediately replaced due to some incapacity or inability to fulfill the presidential responsibilities. The 25th Amendment has actually been invoked 6 times as of the research that I found on the website there with the National Constitution Center. 3 times it was related to presidential succession. The Section 3 of the 25th Amendment, which basically amends Article 2 relating to executive powers, the power of the president. It was invoked for Ronald Reagan as well as George W. Bush, who were undergoing certain medical procedures, and while they were experiencing those surgeries, the 25th Amendment was invoked. And so they actually sent letters to Congress delegating the authority to the vice president for a short number of hours. So a lot of people don't realize this, but for a few hours, Dick Cheney was actually the president of the United States. Pretty interesting. At least he was acting as president of the United States for a period of time. And I guess George H.W. Bush was acting as president during the time Ronald Reagan was down. So what is required? Well, the best place to look for constitutional interpretation is to actually look at the Constitution. That seems to be a lost art these days. We have all these judges who just want to read whatever they want to into the Constitution. But the rules of statutory construction say that the plain language should be followed unless it is ambiguous or if it works in absurdity. So the Constitution itself should pretty well lay out what the meaning of the 25th Amendment actually is. And so let's look at the section. Section 1 says, in the case of the removal of the president from office or of his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president. So that makes it very clear that if for whatever reason the president is no longer able to serve, the vice president takes over. Section 2, whenever there is a vacancy in the office of the vice president, the president shall nominate a vice president who will take office upon confirmation by a majority vote of both houses of Congress. So if for some reason Mike Pence is no longer going to serve, then he would need to nominate, the president would need to nominate someone, and Congress would actually have to approve. Whereas in the initial candidacy, your vice president doesn't have to be approved by anybody but the presidential nominee. Once that vice president is no longer the vice president, is no longer the active vice president, Congress then gets a say in who the next vice president would be if it was in between terms, voting terms or voting seasons. Section 3, whenever the President transmits to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, and until he transmits to them a written declaration to the contrary, such powers and duties shall be discharged by the Vice President as acting President. So that's why I said Dick Cheney was actually the President of the United States for a very limited window of time. I don't know, some people probably are passing out now in fear that Dick Cheney was close to the nuclear codes for a few hours. All right, but what does this all mean? That means that if the President voluntarily submits a letter to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, and those that he's essentially unable to fulfill his responsibilities as president, he relinquishes his ability to serve as president until he then gives a letter back writing a declaration to the contrary. So essentially the president can himself give up his duties and then by letter take them back. So, I don't think that this section is going to apply here because I seriously doubt that President Trump is going to willingly submit a letter saying that he is unable to discharge his duties as President of the United States. So we can go ahead and mark that section out. So Section 4 is where it gets interesting for those who are chomping at the bit to get President Trump out and unwilling to wait, a mere less than 2 weeks to get to the end of his candidacy and get the swearing in of Joe Biden as president. Section 4 says whenever the vice president so it's not just enough to have the vice president do it. So you hear all these people in the media saying that the Congress has called on Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. Vice President Pence cannot do this on his own. Okay, this is not something he can do alone. There's an and here. It is not or. So anybody laying at Mike Pence's feet some ludicrous requirement that he's supposed to invoke this on his own hasn't read the Constitution. He cannot do this on his own. The Vice President and. Then it says a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments, and that is one that is established by Congress. It's a bipartisan commission under the Commission for Presidential Capacity Act, where Congress sets a commission of bipartisan, there's an equal split between the majority and the minority Senate leaders and House leaders, the Speaker of the House, the majority leader, the minority leader, the majority whip, the minority whip, the Senate leaders and all those types of things. And then there's physicians and psychiatrists or psychologists that are also part of this commission, and they make a determination along with the vice president or of such other bodies Congress may provide by law, transmit to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. The vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting president. So let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that Vice President Pence is willing to invoke the 25th Amendment. Well, then he, along with Congress and this bipartisan commission, could then agree together to invoke the 25th Amendment. So maybe that's why they're leaning on Pence, because obviously the Democrat leaders in Congress are going to agree with this. But the issue is that the Republican leaders aren't going to do that because they don't want to lose their base either. And Mike Pence has already said he's not going to do it anyway. Because this would be a completely unprecedented thing. The court battles would just be ridiculous and ongoing. And I'm sure that Mike Pence is just ready to get out of there as quickly as he can. He is not going to do this. I'm calling it. I just don't see that it's going to happen. But even if he was, I don't see that the congressional leaders on the Republican side are going to agree with this either, because they need to placate the remaining base of what's left and try to salvage whatever they can of the Trump base, which did come out mightily for him in this presidential election. Just wasn't enough because they didn't go out and collect mail-in ballots like the other side did. But I digress. So let's say that they do that. Well, then there's an opportunity for the president to take action. It says in the later paragraph, when the president transmits to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that no inability exists, he shall resume the powers and duties of his office unless the Vice President and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive department or of such other body as Congress may by law provide transmit within 4 days to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the President is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. So the President, assuming that Vice President Pence and this Congressional Commission can agree to send this letter to the President of the Senate and to the Speaker of the House, claiming that President Trump is unable to discharge his duties, the President can then send his own written declaration, I can handle it. I'm the president, I can run and be the president, it's no problem. Well, at that point, everything that Vice President Pence and the Congress and all of them have done is for naught, because he is still able to serve as president as long as he sends that written declaration. Now then, within 4 days, the Vice President can yet again, along with a majority of that commission and body of Congress and so forth, can then again send their written declarations again to the President pro temp of the Senate. So it says then Congress will decide the issue, assembling within 48 hours for that purpose, if not in session, which I don't believe they are in session right now. If the Congress within 21 days after receipt of the latter written declaration, which would be the one from Pence and from the commission, or if Congress is not in session within 21 days after Congress is required to assemble, determines by 2/3 vote of both houses that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall continue to discharge the same as acting president. Otherwise, the president shall resume the powers. So here we go. So we have the tennis match between the vice president and this commission and the president. And if it can't be resolved by agreement, it goes to both houses of Congress. And the House of Representatives has to pass by a 2/3 vote, and the Senate has to pass by 2/3 vote, essentially ruling that the president can no longer act in his capacity and discharge the duties of the presidency. Now, let's just put on our thinking caps here. What is the likelihood of getting a 2/3 vote from both houses of Congress? From either the House of Representatives, probably more of a chance there, but in the Senate, where they barely have a majority vote by having a vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, when she gets into office, but they're not even in charge in the Senate right now. Right now, the Republican is the majority of the Senate until the change of power. And that's not going to be any time until after the inauguration. So I'm not exactly sure what the plan is and the push is for this 25th Amendment stuff. I think it's all smoke and mirrors. They're playing to their base. The Democrats, they're playing to their base, which is fine. The media is loving it. That's what they're all about. And the president's going to be out in just a few days. In the meantime, they're spending our taxpayer dollars so that we can pay more taxes later on. Even though basically Trump has already conceded. He says that there's going to be an orderly transfer of power. And frankly, I just don't see any possibility that the 25th Amendment gets invoked. I do think that there's probably a strong possibility that there'll be some grandstanding and filing of articles of impeachment by some of the Democrat leaders. But by the time they are able to get anything moving on it, it will be what the Supreme Court has called a moot case, because President Trump will already be out of office, and you can't impeach a no longer sitting president. You can only impeach a president while they are serving as president. So there's just no way that either of those two things are going to happen unless the president resigns or if he passes away. That's going to be the only way that Trump's going to get out of office, and people can kick and scream yell and moan, but that just is what it is. It's just incredibly hard to remove a person from office. Even, Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, they were impeached, but they weren't removed. Now, I know Richard Nixon resigned, but Bill Clinton, he was impeached, but he wasn't removed by the Senate because the Senate didn't want Al Gore becoming president. So anyway, I hope this is helpful so that you understand what's required with the 25th Amendment, so you can stop looking at all the Facebook memes and all the Twitter memes and getting all your education from these fake news, these memes and all this stuff that people share and they have no idea what they're talking about. This is the Constitution. Pull it out, read it, understand it, and when you do, you can speak intelligently about this very sad predicament, frankly, that our country is in right now. My advice is take care of you and yours. No matter who the president is, you're responsible for your life. You're responsible for your money. You're responsible for making the best situation for your family. So take your eyes off of Fox News and CNN. Maybe watch CNBC. That one's not so bad. You follow the money, it gets you where you need to go. But take care of you and yours. It doesn't matter who the president is. Make sure that you are taking care of who's in your circle of influence, and trust in God, everything's going to be okay. So have a great weekend. We'll be in touch. Again, my name's Attorney Drew Page. You can reach me at my Suffolk, Virginia office at 757-935-9065. My website is www.randallpagelaw.com. And my email is drewpage@randallpagelaw.com. Be sure to check out my new book, The Right Defense for a Traffic Offense in Virginia. There'll be a link below in the description. You can pick that up in paperback for $16.95. You can pick it up on your Kindle ebook for $9.99. And if you read it, you got any suggestions, please feel free to email me. I'm working on a second book right now regarding commercial vehicles and tractor trailer drivers. So be on the lookout for that. Take care.